Every second, every minute, every day, news is breaking, events occur, and there are new developments. At Signature TV, we follow these stories objectively, bringing all sides without bias, explaining the complex issues, breaking down the numbers, and investigating the issues behind the news. Anywhere and everywhere, near or far, wherever the news is, we will be there. Signature TV. News in your pocket.
You're still watching Signature Morning here on Signature TV. Now, recently, Amnesty International released a detailed report highlighting the widespread extrajudicial killings in Nigeria, particularly in the southeast. And this has raised a lot of issues. This has raised a lot of debate about the security situation in the country and what the authorities are doing about it. Now, to join us on this conversation via Zoom this morning is Mazi Emeka Umabalasi, talking on the many Igbos who are being killed through extrajudicial killings. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program. All right, now looking at the report that has been released, Amnesty International documented about 1,800 killings in the southeast. Now, first of all, I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on this report, and how credible are these figures that are being brought out by this report?
So talking about the technical look at Amnesty International report, well, because of the international dimension or correlation of the report, it's a commendable one. Every research, social science research, must have some degree of validity. So to that extent, the Amnesty International report is commendable, especially as with regard to the fact that the report is centered on what is going on, or what has been happening in the southeast, covering according to the report, 2021 to 2023. So there are a lot of validity attached to that report. In other words, the report is valid, to a very reasonable extent. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Emeka, your group allegedly, they alleges 32,300 unarmed civilians killed between 2015 to 2024. How do you count it? What is the metrics of counting? And where do you get all this report from?
Yeah, well, just like our report came out before that of Amnesty International. So definitely it is most likely that the Amnesty International report was built on our report. Because like you rightly said, our report contained 282 pages covering 2015 to 2024, which is a period of almost 10 years. And you just likely quoted the figure released there. So when you look at the figure of our people killed outside the law, we are not talking about lawful killings. We are talking about these 32,000 something are those killed outside the law. So we're talking about them 2015 to 2024. Then one unique thing you must understand pertaining to these particular killings has to do with the actors involved. Who are those people responsible for the killings? Why do we have security agencies deployed to do what? Agree that Eastern Nigeria or South and South is criminologically a blue-collar society. In a blue-collar society, you have this high degree of criminalities, particularly what we refer to as street criminalities. Unlike in white-collar society, when you have pen robbers and things like that. So having that at the back of our mind, such security forces are deployed to manage, to checkmate these crimes and have them nip them in the bud by preventing them, by tracking the perpetrators and fishing out the perpetrators, by avoiding the cases of arresting or going after those who are not involved, who are never involved, and they have them labeled as those involved. These are the work of the security agencies. But if you take a critical look at both studies by Amnesty International and the Inter-Society, you will discover that in the Southeast, although our own was extended to the South-South, that is to say, whole Eastern Nigeria or Eastern Nigeria region, if you like, you will find out that the state actors, armed state actors, talking about the military, the intelligence agency, and the various crack squad of Nigerian police force involved. So you have a segment of the killings that which are attributed to them. Then you also have another segment of the killings that has to do with all these armed non-state actor criminal entities, and which is subdivided into extrajudicial killings and killings on the ground of religion and ethnicity. So all these things are put together. And they also, you look at, very importantly, in the area of non-state armed non-state actors, did they act alone, or are they acting alone, or are they government affiliated, or are they just organized, independently organized criminal entities who go about killing members of the innocent civilian population? So all these things we are looked into. That is why if you critically look into that 32,300 or thereabout, you will see that the military accounted for either 10,000 something or 15,000. I can't recall the statistics. Then you will see that the jihadists, those who are killing on the ground of religion and ethnicity, like Fulani jihadists and what have you, also have their own portion, about 6,500 or 7,000. You have the government affiliated and non-state actor and criminal entities. They have their own responsibility in terms of casualty figure. Then you also talk about non-government affiliated armed non-state actors. You have the number of people they killed, and who are these non-government affiliated armed non-state actors? They are just independent criminal entities, like armed robbers, like kidnappers and all that. Those who independently arm themselves by themselves, or in conspiracy with other members of independent civilian population, maybe some successful businessmen, which we call troublesome billionaires or millionaires and what have you, and take it upon themselves to use abduction, captivity killing, disappearances, and what have you, to the furtherance of their, as a means of livelihood. So all these things must be categorized for people to be able to understand what is happening. Then the general form of it is that disappointedly, the security forces deployed in the eastern Nigeria, particularly in the southeast, especially members of the Nigerian Armed Forces, we are found by report to have recklessly engaged in incessancy of abductions, house burnings, killings, disappearances, sexual harassment, brutalities, and what have you, all outside the laws, that have nothing to do with, that can be best described as extrajudicial, extra-legal, extrajudicial, and so on and so forth. These are the grand summary of the findings. And I think that Amnesty International report was also built on this, even though there are lapses in their own analysis. Thank you.
Rule of law concerning this ongoing judicial killings, and what does the Constitution say about it? And to what extent do you think that these international bodies can pursue this and get, a positive result?
Well, let me say, not. I think you said judicial, or I think you meant extrajudicial. The law is very, 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 very sufficient in terms of provision of safeguards. against all these killings. But even the laws establishing those armed state actors, in our report, that was why that report rose to, in terms of pagination, rose to 282 pages, because we went total. The report was so comprehensive that we even have to bring our lawyerly, those of us who are lawyers, and criminological, those of us who are criminologists, and what have you, and the experts in peace studies and conflict resolution and things like that. We have to bring we have to congregate and aggregate all these expertise and have them brought to the fore in terms of that particular report you are referring to. In other ways, we also went as far as looking at, for instance, the Armed Forces Act of 2004. The Armed Forces Act have sufficient safeguards, provisions against all these conduct atrocities. If you look at, for instance, Section 108 of the Armed Forces Act of 2004, it prohibits extortion and related conduct atrocities. But it also went it goes in it further prescribed for 14 years imprisonment for any member of armed forces caught extorting money from people. So you look at the Nigerian Police Act of 2020 as amended. It also said that law, that act of Nigeria Federation is described by some experts as the most human rights friendly police act ever enacted in Nigeria. But the challenge we have is that those who are sworn members of Nigerian police force, from constable to the IGP, are in that report found one thing in one way or the other. They also found to have completely abandoned the act establishing the act for Nigerian police, the establishment act for Nigerian armed forces, the establishment act for Nigerian security, and what do you call it, this DSA, the Department of Security, State Security Services, they established by the National Security Agencies Act of 2004, incorporating the DSS, ADIA, and the military intelligence. The act is sufficiently explained in that particular report, and the areas of where the operation, the operational officers of these security establishment were found wanting. We also highlighted, you look at other laws, several other laws, like for instance, Access to Criminal Justice Act of 2015. We also took a look at it, the Terrorism Prevention Act, and Terrorism Financing and what have you Act of their respective years. We also looked into. You look at also the provisions of the Constitution, because the Constitution in Section 1, subsection 2 and 3, things like that, said that any other law in Nigeria, any other law is under the supremacy and the general overseership of the 1999 Constitution. So it is whatever police is going to do, whatever is contained in Police Establishment Act and Nigerian Armed Forces Establishment Act must be done in consonance, in line, and in supremacy of the 1999 Constitution. And you also look at the 1999 Constitution. It has fair, reasonable provisions, safeguards, to guide against all these things. That is why you have Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution, which is also justiciable by virtue of Section 46 of the Constitution. If you go to Chapter 4 from Section 33 to 44, and the things like that, to 41, 42, 43, they have provisions, fundamental human rights. But in practice, these laws, beautiful laws, and apart from 1999 Constitution, Nigeria is also a party. Nigeria is not an isolated state. Nigeria is claimed to be a respected member of the respected member state of the United Nations. And to that extent, Nigeria and the African Union. And to that extent, Nigeria is also a party to various, not less than 70 international human rights treaties, charters, protocols, principles, and what have you, including the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which the Nigerian National Assembly Nigeria's National Assembly, federal government signed and ratified and subjected it to the National Assembly of Nigeria in 1983 to domesticate, making Nigeria a full party, state party to that particular beautiful provision. Then we talk about United Nations, International Charter on Human and People's Rights, and so many others. And the most importantly, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And another one, the 1949 Geneva Conventions, or Law of Armed Conflict of 1949, which is mandatory for any independent state, member state of UN, to subscribe to, which Nigeria subscribed to in 1961, months after the country gained her independence on 1st October 1960. So you have several laws, safeguards, local, regional, international, guiding all these operations. But what do we have? We have the security forces of the York, security forces of the Stone Age. They kill at will, they abduct at will, they disappear at will, they do whatever. In addition, and all these things, let me make this point. All these things are compounded by the partisanship, sectionalism, bias, and what have you of the security forces, where any member of Eastern Nigeria or Igbo ethnic nationality is a potential member of criminal gang, according to the Nigerian security setting and the what have you. So that is, and which we call ethno-religious profiling. Thank you.
Exactly. Now, you've said quite a number of things, Mr. Umar Balasi, but I just want you to throw more light on some particular things that were stated in that report. First of all, that report says that the term unknown gunmen is a misleading term, and since the perpetrators are often known within their communities. And another portion of that report also says that some communities are described as ungoverned spaces under the control of armed forces. So I'd like to know, what does that mean when we say that certain areas in the southeast are ungoverned spaces under the control of armed group, and that the perpetrators of these acts are within their community? Please throw more light on that.
I think I disagree with Amnesty International on that, with all due respect. That is why I say Amnesty International report, where it is understood it is a foreign-based organization, it may not have the network and the contact to be able to establish all the facts it wanted. The truth of the matter is that when your community, if for instance I'm from Ezinit Agwata, is already all over the world and not hiding my community. Ezinit Agwata in Anambra State. I think in Ezinit Agwata, my community, I know of a former chairman of National Human Rights Commission that has not set his feet on his community for the past 4 years. So what do you do? What do you do? His community is under siege by both security forces, criminal security forces, and the so-called unknown government. Now, what if a community is under siege? What do you expect that community to do? I just watched a video of a Christian village in northern Nigeria where these Fulani jihadists and their allies invaded and placed the community under siege and abducted most of their women and took their women to their camp, nearby camp where they established a camp, and ordered their wives to be marching on top of those women. Now what do you do? I know of a certain community around the Isukwata local government area of Abia State that has been under siege in the past 6 years by Fulani jihadists. To the extent that if you carry out the what we call this DNA test or genetical test of children born in the past 6 years there, you will notice that maybe 20% or 30% of them were born by Fulani jihadists. What do you make of that? How do you expect that community to react? That is the situation. These are the realities on the ground. So when a community is under siege, either by armed, likewise the armed state actors, if a community is under siege by members of the armed forces, then you find out that there will be high reports of cases of rape, sexual harassment, wiping out, attempt to wipe out the productive members of the population or indigenous of that community. So it is you are talking about a state of helplessness. You understand? So I fault Amnesty International in that regard. It is not true. There is nothing a community that is under siege. And we are talking about a community that Nigerian security forces, armed forces, have come and disarmed and took away all their self-defense protective weapons. And what do you expect? And that is the reason why many of these communities in Igbo land are vulnerable and prone to attacks by foreign herdsmen because security forces of area disarmed them, took away all their arms. What do you expect? How do you expect that community to react? Don't you know that such community is already terrified and will be so afraid to talk to anybody, to even make a call, or things like that? So you now find members of the community. What is the alternative they have? If not to join the what do you call it? I remember the Anambra lawyers the Anambra law students, lawyers anyway, that were kidnapped somewhere between Wukari and the Benue road. One of them gave account of what happened. It does not mean that the people who abducted them were TV or what is TV people or what have you. But the guy is trying to tell us that that community is a TV community, but under siege by externally assembled armed men. So they said that their children, their women, their men, especially the aged one, excuse me, the elderly ones, we are watching them helplessly while they were being taken to their camp and what have you, tortured and what have you. So what do you expect that community to do?
Exactly.
I think the fact remains that there is one important thing we must point out in the Amnesty International report, a major lacuna in the Amnesty International report. Amnesty International report was unable or failed to identify the sources of all these armed men. Who are those arming them? Who are they? Where are they coming from? What was their mission or what is their mission? That is area that Amnesty International, and in our report, suspense report, we were able to dig deeper to be able to smoke.
All right. Mazi Umabalasi, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Are you still on the line? All right, it seems we've lost him and we're actually out of time. We're speaking to Mazi Emeka Umabalasi, a criminologist and researcher, head International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law Inter-Society. Well, that's much we can take on that conversation, and we'll be having Political Circle with Luke Umbo coming up next.